So we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Board of Trustees, MISD, on May 5th at 6 o'clock. The first thing that we're going to do is say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody will rise and look at the flags on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible. Okay, so we did not have any public comments tonight for the board. And so with that, the main purpose of tonight is to go into the budget workshop. And so Bo and Chris, if you guys want to go ahead and just take it away from there.
Yes, sir. Thanks everybody for your time this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Lynn, and I believe he'll be sharing his screen with you as he has a presentation on the budget.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Reese. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. I apologize. I'm not the most comfortable with this Zoom platform, so hopefully we'll make this as entertaining as a finance guy can make a budget workshop. Okay. So tonight, here's what we're going to talk a little bit about. I wanted to start with a little introduction and a couple of opening comments from myself. Then I wanted to do a real quick House Bill 3 review. It's been almost a year since House Bill 3 was passed, and so wanted to cover a couple of things in House Bill 3. We'll look at the 1920 budget status, and then I'll give you a preview of the 2021 budget that includes estimated revenue and preliminary expenditure information. And so if you will indulge me for the next couple of minutes, since this is my first time to get to interact with y'all, I wanted to just give a brief introduction about myself. And I know we have some community members who are probably listening and wondering who this new guy is. So just a little quick history about me. I have spent the last 19 years in Channelview ISD. I started out as the assistant business manager and then was promoted to the chief financial officer, and then once again promoted to the assistant superintendent of finance, where I spent the last 15 years. And even though the title says assistant superintendent of finance, as you can see, I also had the responsibility of several other departments throughout the organization. And so maintenance, transportation, nutrition, human resources, public relations, communications, tax office, and was responsible for the bond programs in 03, 09, and 2019. And so I am ecstatic to not be wearing that many hats. So thank you for that opportunity. Just one of the notes that I'm proud of, I was proud of all of my accomplishments while we were in Channelview, but one of the biggest things was our fund balance increased from $8.5 million to $33.7 million during my time in the district. And that's not solely because of me. Obviously, that's because of a joint effort between our superintendent, our board of trustees, and some of the advice that our business office was able to provide. On a personal level, just so people know, I am married to Tiffany. She is an educator and has been an educator for about 16 years and has taught the majority of those years at the elementary level, but also has spent some time at the junior high level. And so currently, as Dr. Reese kind of mentioned before the meeting got started, we're currently living in Atascocita. We put our house up for sale on Saturday, And right before this meeting, I got notified that we have numerous offers. And so here very quickly, I'm probably going to be homeless. And so if you have an empty room, just let me know, and I might need to crash so I'm not living under a bridge. But anyway, we're very happy to be a part of this district and this community. And so with that, I wanted to transition into just some opening comments from someone who is new to the district. And hopefully this may help us focus a little bit on things that we're going to discuss tonight. I know from experience that when you have been part of an organization or a community for a long time, sometimes you can lose sight of those things that make your district or your community special. Even with the social distancing restrictions, since my arrival to MISD on April the 1st, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of terrific people. Everyone has been so welcoming and friendly to both Tiffany and I while we embark on this transition in our lives. During my conversations, you can see how proud they are to be a part of the community, to be a part of the MISD team, and how proud they are of the great things going on in the district. When you scroll through social media, it doesn't take long to see how passionate the employees of the district are about educating children and to see all of the creative, innovative things that they are doing to positively impact the lives of the children of MISD. I'm sure it's because I am the new CFO, but one topic that continually comes up during my conversations is the district budget. The state of Texas refers to its reserves as the rainy day fund. So to play off of that weather terminology, if there is a cloud forming in the distance in the otherwise sunny skies of MISD, it might be the budget. A deficit budget happens from time to time and is nothing to worry about. But a deficit that continues from year to year eventually has detrimental effects on the organization. A couple of these effects are: one, it can prevent you from providing competitive salary increases to all employees. And at some point, this will result in the loss of very talented people to neighboring districts who pay more, and it will also limit your ability to recruit the most talented people to take their place. Second, a reduced number of resources for the classrooms keeps great educators from doing even better things for kids. It also does not allow for adequate staffing levels, which causes employees to take on additional duties, reducing their focus from the primary task at hand. To circle back to the weather analogy, while the budget might be a hot topic, it is certainly not raining outside. Unfortunately, budget decisions are always difficult because most of the time they involve real people with real families. This is especially true for MISD since all of the easy decisions have already been made. I want to make sure to emphasize none of my comments tonight are meant to be construed as a negative or a criticism of any decisions made by previous or current administrators or trustees, but instead as an opportunity to refocus our efforts to make sure that we continue MISD even better than it is today. Obviously, the Board of Trustees and the Superintendent determine the direction that we will travel. I hope that in time, you will put your trust and your faith in me to help guide you through the financial situations that we will encounter as we continue to travel towards even better things. You will come to find that the advice that I will give you will be based on what is best for MISD, not what is best for me or any other individual. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to be a part of the MISD team, and I look forward to building long-lasting relationships and hope to be your trusted financial resource for many years to come. So, with all of that out of the way, thank you for indulging me for a few minutes, but let's get into why we're here tonight. As I stated, I wanted to do a real quick review of House Bill 3, because I don't know how it was for y'all, but last summer was extremely crazy with all of the changes that were coming through with House Bill 3. And so it took a little while to figure out how some of these things were going to be implemented. And so I just wanted to touch on a few items real quick. And so primarily House Bill 3 focused on 4 different areas. Number 1 was supports teachers and rewards excellence. And a part of those focuses were the teacher incentive allotment, increased minimum salary schedule, a mentor allotment program, and the do not hire registry. And here in just a minute, we're going to talk about the compensation piece of that section as well. The second focus was on learning and improving student outcomes, where they targeted early literacy, including pre-K, dual language allotment, and then at the top of the page, improving college, career, and military readiness, which we'll touch on in just a second, increasing support for special ed, and expanding learning opportunities. Third, we have the increases, funding, and equity. And so they made some modifications to the comp ed allotment, which we'll discuss in a little bit. They changed from prior year values to current year values to equalize tier 1 funding. And then finally, they made a lot of changes to property taxes and recapture. And so we'll touch on property taxes tonight as well. The first piece of that I wanted to talk about was employee compensation. And so just to make sure that we're all on the same page, House Bill 3 created a new spending requirement related to compensation increases. Now, as you see on the slide right here, it says for school years when the basic allotment increases. So when the basic allotment increases, 30% of any new year-over-year entitlement gains must be spent on employee compensation. 75% of that compensation must go to classroom teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors, with an emphasis on increased compensation for veteran teachers. 25% of the 30% may be used for other employee categories except for administrators. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up tonight as we start to talk about the 2020-2021 fiscal year, it's important to note, you'll see over here on the right-hand side, that the 2021 basic allotment is the same as it was for 1920. So there is no requirement of a mandatory pay raise for employees this year. The next area I wanted to focus on was CCMR. Obviously, this was something that was new in House Bill 3, and CCMR incentives allow districts to earn additional funds for preparing graduates for college, a career, or the military. And the district earns these bonuses based on the number of annual graduates that are in 3 different categories: economically disadvantaged, non-economically disadvantaged, and special education. And so depending on the type of student and whether we meet the threshold or not, the district would qualify for a $5,000 bonus if it was an economically disadvantaged graduate, $3,000 for non-economically disadvantaged, and $2,000 for a special education student. Since this is new money, there's always questions about how this money should be spent. And so the spending requirements are that 55% of this new money must be spent on improving CCMR for grades 8 through 12. And the allowable use of these funds is to support college and career advising, including preparation, professional development, and training for counselors in FAFSA, college entrance requirements, career awareness, and work-based learning. Also for establishing or maintaining college and career readiness school models, and providing support for teacher and student preparation for things such as ACT, SAT, dual credit, AP, and IB programs. The next area was comp ed, compensatory education. And so the changes in this program, the overall allotment increased from 0.20 to a range of 0.225 to 0.275, depending on the student's neighborhood based on the census block in which the student resides. And so down here at the bottom of the screen, you see there are 5 tiers. Tier 1 being the highest socioeconomic status, and tier 5 being the lowest. And so for Montgomery ISD, we have students in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 for 1920. We did not have any students that were in Tier 4 or Tier 5 for compensatory education. Comp Ed requires 55% of the allotment be spent on the state Comp Ed program, and it also requires a Comp Ed advisory committee. The last point of House Bill 3 that I wanted to cover tonight was about tax rates. And I know we all love to pay our taxes, but unfortunately that's just one of the things we have to do as adults. And so House Bill 3 completely changed how the M&O tax rate is divided and the amount of the tax rate. And so as we look at what it was for House Bill 3, the Tier 1 tax rate was $1. Districts had the opportunity to ask for 4 additional pennies to increase that tax rate to $1.04 without obtaining voter approval. Anything above $1.04 required the voters to approve via a tax ratification election. And so as we moved into the 1920 fiscal year, this dollar tax rate was compressed down to 93 cents. The district still maintained the ability to add 4 golden pennies to that without voter approval. And so that is why the district's tax rate for 1920 was 97 cents, okay? Anything above that 97 cents requires voter approval, even though we did not have that ability for 1920, okay? So as we transition into 2020, 2021, once again, here you see the 93 cents. For this coming year, that's going to be compressed even further down to 9164, okay? The district still has the availability to add those 4 pennies, plus there is additional latitude for the board to add 1 additional penny for a total of 5 to bring that rate to 0.9664. Anything above that 9664 would require approval from the community via a tax ratification election, okay? Now this 0.9164 is based on the state's estimated property value growth of 4%. So if you are a district that's actually growing faster than the state, your rate will be compressed even further, okay? And so this is an example right here with a district with a local value growth of 10% for tax year 2020. And so you take the 0.93 and then multiply it times 1.025 divided by the local property value growth percentage. In this case would be 10%, which is 1.1. And so that district would have their tax rate lowered to 0.8665. Now they have the ability to add the 4 cents, and if the board unanimously approves the additional 1 penny to bring that to 5, then their maximum tax rate could be 0.9165. We will not be tasked with calculating these percentages. The state will provide each district their maximum compressed rate in early August of 2020. I believe the latest date that I've seen is August the 5th. Originally, that was supposed to happen in July, but now they have pushed that back to August of 2020, okay? So that is a real quick speed review of House Bill 3. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions or comments that I could help clarify about House Bill 3?
I have a question, Chris. How big was the Channel View budget annually?
Our budget was, when I left, was a little over $80 million a year.
So very similar to us.
Yes, sir. Channel View is roughly the same size as Montgomery. We had 9,700 students and roughly a $82 million budget.
My question is, your increase in your fund budget is, relatively speaking, really big. How did y'all do that?
Our board,
Your fund balance.
sure, our board of trustees, from long before I even got there, had the notion that they always wanted the district to be lean and mean. And that's using their terminology, okay? And so we just found the ways to do things that needed to be done in the most efficient way possible. And so that was something that was a real priority to the boards in Channelview. Of course, every district is different. And so, you know, that may not be as big of a priority here. But they, you know, like I said, we just found every possible way to be as efficient and still provide the quality services that we needed to provide. And so, you know, the demographics in Channelview were completely different than what they are here in Montgomery ISD. We were very proud that not only could we be fiscally responsible, but, you know, we were very proud that we could have a B rating because we had a very high, low socioeconomic standing in Channelview ISD. And so it took a lot to get our kids to achieve at a high level, just because most of them didn't come from substantial backgrounds, and their parents were working multiple jobs, and they were helping to raise siblings or something like that. So that's a long way to answer your question, but we were just honestly just as efficient as we could possibly be.
No, I appreciate it. I have one more quick question.
Yes,
if I heard you right, you sold debt 3 times, 2003, 2009, 2017 or 18?
19, yes, sir.
How much were those offerings?
So our first bond program in 2003 was $50 million. The one in 50, yes, sir. The one in 2009 was $111 million, and then the one that we passed in 2019 was 195.4.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anything else?
This is Adam.
Yes, sir.
The fact that the basic allotment did not increase this coming year, was that a surprise to everyone? Because I remember when HB 3 came about, it was almost like everyone was thinking there was going to be mandatory increases year after year into perpetuity. Maybe I was the one that misunderstood that, but did this catch anyone by surprise?
I think sometimes the devil is in the details, and not necessarily when the press conferences are being held. And so I think that it was just a sheer, the issue was that there was so much information that was coming out. Maybe sometimes it wasn't as clearly communicated as we would have liked. I know that it was kind of put out there as this was going to be an annual kind of thing. But unfortunately, as you can see from that came straight from TEA. That's just not what the bill says. Now, there's nothing that prevents you from obviously providing a pay increase if the district so chooses. And that's why I knew that there was probably some confusion around that topic. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure we talked about it tonight, just so that the board knew you are under no obligation to do that for 2021. I know probably a lot of your teaching staff and some of your other employees throughout the district probably have an assumption that you're required to do it, but there is no legal obligation to do it.
So Chris, just to tag on to Adam's question, is it right to say that that because we didn't receive an additional allotment and the base tax rate is going down, that the district in essence, has less money to spend?
Well, we'll cover that in just a minute, if you don't mind. Revenues are actually I'm estimating that revenues are gonna be a little higher next year than what you adopted for 1920. But you still have to look at the bottom line, and when we get done allocating all of those funds, how much money do you have left over? Are you in a surplus, or are you in a deficit? And so we'll cover that information here in just a few minutes. Anybody else? Thank you for the questions. I appreciate that. So just real quick, a real quick kind of standing of where we are for the 2019-2020 budget. And so I want to thank, I don't know if they're on the call tonight, but I want to give a shout out to my staff in the finance department for pulling these numbers together for me yesterday so I could have them for tonight. I just want to say I'm surrounded by a great staff here in the department, and I'm really blessed with their knowledge that they can help me make this transition. And so hopefully they're listening and get the pat on the back. These are our 2019-20 revenues as of April 30th. And so you can see that the original budgeted amount was $72.776 million. As of April 30th, the district had collected $71,238,385, or 97.89% of what was originally budgeted when you adopted the budget last June. And so you can see that total property taxes is more than what had been estimated. State revenues, this TRS number is always a plug-in number, so it'll match what the expenditures actually are. And then you see your federal revenues are higher, and your miscellaneous revenues are higher than what was budgeted. So all in all, I feel confident that the revenues are going to at least meet what was budgeted. So it's been a good year for the district on the revenue side. As we transition into the expenditures for 1920, once again, these are as of April the 30th. And so the district had spent $58,862,757 of the original budgeted amount of $77,162,395. That equates to approximately 76% of the budget that was approved. And so after 10 months, you would expect that if you were going to spend 100% of that budget, that you would be trending about 83%. And so there is, the expenditures are trailing that budgeted number. There's been a lot of change in operations here over the last month and a half. And so that has definitely helped keep some of those expenditures down. And so we'll continue to monitor these expenditures to see how we end up for the year. But that's where we stand as of April the 30th.
Hey, Chris, this
Yes,
is
sir.
Jim. Do you have a sense as to how much of an expense save that we're seeing on a monthly basis due to the difference in operations?
Yes. So your highest monthly expenditure was back in September at about 6.7 million. And for April, the district spent 5.7 million. So there's a difference of about $1 million from your peak time back in September. The rest of the months, you're kind of looking at October at 6.6 million. Normally they're hovering around a little over 6 million each month. So there's several $100,000 difference between what was done for the last part of March and April. So it's adding up quickly. Obviously, you know, with school not reopening for the rest of the year, those trends will continue. We won't be expending as much as we would have otherwise. And so, you know, it's something that I'm monitoring closely and trying to figure out where that number is going to be at the end of the year. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Did we, maybe this is a question for Bo. I don't recall, and maybe I just am not remembering correctly. Did we approve any additional expenses at the Aquatic Center? Why were we 252% above the budget for last year on that?
No, we did not approve additional dollars there. We've had some maintenance items that we've been working on there, and I believe Chris has been in contact with Athletic Director Hurd on some of those.
Yeah, I think I've been in contact with Athletic Director Hurd about some additional expenditures that need to take place even above these. So I'm not prepared tonight to be able to tell you exactly where that number came from, but I'll be happy to dig into it and give you some more information. I know when I came on board that budget was already over. So I'm assuming there were some repair, maintenance type issues that took place earlier in the year, but we can get you that information.
And we also rent the water to the Montgomery Athletic Swim Club, and they have not been able to utilize that facility the last month or this month or next month, and so that will impact some of the revenues that offset some of the expenditure.
Yeah, so any other questions about revenues or expenditures for 1920? I'm going to move forward with a preview of the 2020-2021 budget. I'd like to start with kind of some progress that we've made up to this point. With my arrival, I will be implementing some restructuring of the budget coding system in order to help simplify the coding system for campuses and departments. For those of you who are not intimately involved or knowledgeable of the finance coding system for Texas schools, it consists of a string of numbers that are 20 numbers long, okay? And so in order to help simplify some of those budget codes, MISD, let me back up, MISD has been using all 20 of those numbers, okay? In order to help simplify the coding structure, I'm going to be eliminating the budget manager portion of that number, which will eliminate the last two numbers of the budget coded so they can be 0. And I can accomplish the same thing through using the organization and the PIC codes to track the expenditures and get the proper approvals with 18 numbers that was previously being done with 20. And so hopefully that's something that for people who don't use the budget code numbers all the time will help make it a little easier. In addition, we're going to be standardizing some of the sub-object codes. And so the sub-object codes are kind of in the middle of the budget code, and they help easily identify special programs or departments or whatever the campus or department wants to split out from a budget code. And so it's been MISD practice that most of those numbers, most of those sub-object codes are numbers. It's been my experience in the past that people can remember them easier if they are 2 letters. And so in this particular instance, I say BD instead of 15. So in MISD, 15 has represented the band program on different campuses. However, on some other campuses, 15 is used for an entirely different program. And so from the finance side, when we are trying to pull expenditures for the band program and we plug in 15, we're also pulling in information from other organizations that aren't band related. And so I want to make sure that we standardize the codes and everybody uses the same code. Also, as I said, going to 2 letters makes it a little easier because it's easier to remember BD stands for band than 15. And so those are just a couple of the coding changes that we'll be making. Up to this point, I have completed in-person campus budget meetings for 8 out of the 10 campuses. I have the 9th meeting on Thursday, and then we were just waiting for Mr. Eaton to get out of the hospital and recover before we could have his campus budget meeting. During those meetings, they are in person. I sit down and we review personnel changes with the principals. We talk about any changes in stipends, such as department heads or grade level stipends that they may be entitled to. We talk about transfers if they're moving from one grade level to another. And we also talk about exits, just to make sure that we have all of the appropriate personnel coded to that campus and to the right codes. Also during those meetings, we provide an overview of the budget process, and we end up starting the preliminary campus budgets and actually plug in numbers in to the system. I have a little different way of running the budget process than what's been done here in the district in the past. I firmly believe that the campus principals are the instructional leaders of the campus, and they know what needs their students have on their particular campus. And so as much as possible, I push money down to the campuses based on the student population that earns that money for the campus. There will be some money, obviously, that needs to be held at the district level for district departments to make decisions about, but most of the money is put on the campuses and in hands of the campus principal. And so I've completed most of those campus meetings, and I will start scheduling in-person department budget meetings for the week of May the 11th. And so as the numbers that I'm about to show you here in a few minutes, obviously I have not had an opportunity based on my short time here to be able to sit down and meet with all the different budget directors, but we will accomplish that just as soon as we possibly can. So as we look at these numbers, they are not final by any means. They are very preliminary. And since I have not, we'll get there in a minute. These are the preliminary revenue estimates. And so when you look at the 2019-2020 revenues again, you can see that 72.7 million was what was adopted. 71.2 million is what's already been collected. My estimate for 2020-2021 at this time is $75.366 million. So it's an increase of a little over $2 million, $2.6 million from what was adopted in 2019-2020. Now, that is a good thing, but once again, you still need to look at the expenditures that are already allocated to see how how the final picture looks. And so as we move into the allocations, since I have not had an opportunity to meet with all campus principals, I have blocked out each campus, the specifics of each campus, okay? Just because these are preliminary numbers, and I don't want somebody to be on the meeting tonight and freak out or not understand what these numbers mean. And so let me walk you through each one of these columns, and then I'll explain to you a little bit about what it means. And so for each campus, I have projected an enrollment for next year. And so the district's total enrollment is 8,960, and that came from the PEIMS snapshot from 1920. And so we're in the process of trying to update that number to get as accurate of a projected enrollment for each campus as possible. This column that says salaries right here is the amount of regular education teachers that are on each one of those campuses, okay? So the total of all regular education teachers on that on the campuses is $39.7 million. This column that says other expenses, I come up with by taking the campus projected enrollment times a set dollar amount per student. So that gives them the money that they need to operate, to buy general supplies, to pay the lease on the copy machine, to buy paper, for student travel, and all of those other things that occur on the campus besides salaries. So when you add the salaries and the other expenses together, you get the base allocation for each campus. And the base allocations are $41.1 million. Now, depending on which program students are in, they earn additional money for that campus. And so our high schools and junior high campuses will have money for the CTE programs, okay? And so currently there's $3.2 million allocated for between the high schools and junior highs for CTE programs. Every campus has students who are in the special services program. And so all campuses have money here for special services of $5.4 million. Now, once again, that includes their special ed teacher salaries are going to be coded there. And then all of the supplies and materials needed for the special ed program will also be coded there, okay? We talked about comp ed earlier, and so our campuses earn additional comp ed money based on the number of kids who are identified at risk. And so there's 1.6 million allocated for comp ed. Not all of our campuses have students who qualify for bilingual education, but those that do, there's $110,000 allocated for bilingual education. Our elementary campuses that have pre-K instruction taking place on them have money here in the early education program of $795,477. And then over here on the far right column, the CCMR program, as we talked about, is for 8th grade through 12th grade, so primarily the high schools. And so there's $504,000 allocated for CCMR, bringing all of the campus total allocations to $52.9 million, okay? And so then that's just half of the information. And so then as we transition into the department allocations, it operates very similarly. Once again, since I have not had a chance to meet with department directors, I've blocked out these preliminary allocations, but you can see that salaries for all of our departments total $10.7 million. The other expenses, now since they don't have student enrollment, obviously I don't multiply, those, I come up with these numbers a little differently. And so these other expenses right now are primarily based on their budget for 1920. Unless I have been made aware of some changes, some increases, let's say, for example, our custodial contract is increasing, then obviously I need to add some money in the maintenance budget to cover those costs. So for the most part, right now, all of these are 1920 levels, unless I have been given some other information. And so some of this may change once I get in the room with the directors and they make me aware of something that I may not be aware of at this point. As I said, there is some CTE money and some comp ed money that has been pulled out for the district level so that district administration can make some district-wide decisions on how to best serve some of those students. But as you can see, it's very little. And then right now I have all of the dyslexia interventionists coded to a district department, and those funds are at the district level, not on the campus level. And so all of the department allocations total $25.3 million, added to the $52.9 million from the campus allocations gets us to $78,260,045. Once again, this total revenue came from my revenue estimate, $73.366 million. And so as we sit here today, the budget looks like it's in a deficit of $2.8, almost $2.9 million. And so just keep in mind, these are a snapshot of where we are today, okay? These numbers will continue to change as I get to have budget meetings with campus principals, department directors, as I continue to refine our revenue estimates. And so some of these things, these numbers are definitely not final, and I don't want anybody to think that these are final. I believe, in contrast, for the 1920 budget, I believe you adopted a deficit of in excess of $4 million. Okay, so as we sit here today, this 2.8 million is better information than what you had when you adopted the 1920 budget. So I think that's a positive takeaway from tonight. Also, keep in mind, I'm extremely conservative, and so I'm not going to jump out there and really try and allocate and pinpoint to the dollar all of the exact revenues. I'm going to get as close as I can, but once again, that's kind of a moving target depending on how tax values come in, the protest, and so I'm doing my very best to get an accurate number, but those numbers will be a little different. And so a couple of things that I want you to be aware of that help contribute to this $2.8 million deficit. We were notified this week that the district no longer qualifies for the fast growth allotment money, okay? You did receive that in 1920, and that was just a little over $2 million. I believe it was $2,079,000 that the district received for 1920 for the fast growth allotment. The reason we don't qualify for that was just because our growth was not in the top 75 percentile of districts across the state. I think based on the numbers I saw, we were at like 72.3 or somewhere right around in there. So we just missed it by a couple of percentage points. And that's based on a 3-year look at enrollment growth. And so if enrollment growth continues, picks back up, we may be back in that allotment again, but for 2021, we do not qualify. The other thing that we do not qualify for 2021 is the new instructional facilities allotment. So the district had gotten money, I guess, for the first time in 1819, based on the new campus, some of the new campuses that were opened. And so then you got a reduced amount for 1920 because you get it for the second year. And then once you get into that third year, you don't get it anymore. And so that was approximately $350,000 that the district no longer qualifies for. So there's about $2.3 million right there of money that's not coming from the state that you have had access to in the past. And so with all of those factors, and given my new arrival to the district and still trying to learn as much as possible, I think this $2.8 million deficit, while it may not be exactly where we want to be, I still think it's a positive take for tonight, that we're not in excess of $4 million like we were for 1920. And so that's basically what I wanted to communicate to you tonight. This is, I can't stress it enough, preliminary. These numbers will change, but I'll open it up and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Chris, can I ask a quick question, kind of high level on here? It looks like that the expenses you're projecting are about $5 million more than the 2019-2020 budget. Is that right?
No, the 2019-2020 expenditures were at 77 million.
77. Okay.
Yes, sir. So it's right about $1 million more, maybe a little bit less than that.
Where's that rough million being plugged into?
Right now, to be honest with you, I have added some money at the campus level in some of these other expenses. When I sat down and looked at campus budgets, I'll be honest, I just don't know how some of them were surviving on what they had. Unfortunately, some of it may have been pushed off, to fundraising and stuff like that. And so based on my experience, I felt like the campuses needed a little bit more money to handle some of the day-to-day operations. So that's where some of it is. And I don't have in front of me like a rolling total of how to break down that extra $1 million, but
No, that's fine. I appreciate it. That's good information. Thanks.
yes, sir. Anybody else?
Yeah, Chris, I have one more question. Can you discuss real quick the impact of a potential record number of property value protests this tax season, and that impact that would have on that deficit budget if a large majority of people are successful and that tax revenue stream gets decreased? I'm assuming the deficit would then increase, correct?
Yes, obviously, that's going to negatively impact the tax collections, which will ultimately impact the revenues. Now, I will say that, I said in the beginning, I'm pretty conservative. And so I have I'm not using the full estimated growth that I've received from the appraisal district at this point. I've backed that down just a little bit, just in case, kind of anticipating some protest and some loss of value. And so as we work through, sir?
Okay. I was just going to say, how much of a haircut did you take off the top?
So based on some of the preliminary numbers I got from the appraisal district, it looked like the district was at about a 6% value growth. Right now, all of these budget numbers are based on 5. So obviously, if it does creep up towards, the 6%, then obviously, we've got to recalculate our tax rate and our maximum compressed rate and all that kind of stuff. But right now, all of my estimates, I'm basing on 5% growth, which is 1% more than the state's 4%. So at this point, if that 5% holds true, that 0.9164 tax rate that I told you, MISD would be adopting a lower tax rate than that 0.9164. And then, of course, you have the 4 pennies that we're entitled to. And then if the board decides to add that 5th penny on there, right now I've got that 5th penny plugged in. But if the board decides that's not what they want to do, then we'll obviously make adjustments as necessary. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir, it did. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, Chris, as far as where we're at in the budget cycle and the process, I always get confused about what the process is and when we have to adopt things and when is it set. If you could kind of explain to us, okay, so we're showing a $2.8 million deficit right now. What does that mean as far as the process, and when do we make a decision about whether that's appropriate or not, or whether we have to go back to the drawing board?
Okay, and so and let me start answering that question by saying normally we would be much further along in this process than we are as we sit here today. Okay, so next year there will be a completely different timeline associated with this budget. Part of the reason why we're only at this point is because of my arrival on April the 1st. Okay, and so I appreciate Dr. Reese for kind of holding the reins back just a little bit and kind of letting me get in. And I know he has been wanting to get information to y'all a whole lot sooner than tonight. And And I promise I'm going as fast as I can go, but trying to learn a whole new district, a whole new finance system, a whole new everything. It's been a whirlwind for 30 days, okay? And so next year at this point, you'll have a whole lot more information than you do right now. But as we leave here tonight, I think it is important for y'all to start having conversations in anticipation of, if this budget deficit remains at that level, is that acceptable from the board perspective? And if it's not, then very quickly, there needs to be some direction given to administration on what is an acceptable level, so that we do have time to make changes. Because once we conclude here tonight, we can have as many other conversations about the budget as you want to. Currently, we have our next budget workshop scheduled for June the 1st, and then the budget has to be adopted before the end of June, okay? And so probably that night of June the 1st, we need to walk away with a final blessing that this is how we're gonna move forward, because from that time period, there's certain advertising requirements and notification requirements that have to take place, and those requirements have timelines associated with them. So in order to meet those timelines and get the budget adopted by the end of June, shortly after June the 1st, we need to be putting a ribbon around this budget and know what we're gonna adopt at the end of the month. You know, this is, like I said, a snapshot of where we are right now. I feel, I'll be honest, each day as I get to dig into the numbers, I start feeling a little more and more comfortable. And so, you know, is it possible that this 2.8 number grows? Yeah, absolutely. Because there's some things that aren't in this number. Like I said, this is based on, especially for the departments, this is based on 1920 budget levels. And so I've already heard, you know, conversations about, you know, the bus fleet, and do we need to add money for additional buses in the budget? Well, those numbers aren't in here yet, okay? So if that's determined that we need additional buses, or if we need additional whatever it is for whatever department, then this number might grow. And so yeah, I think it is important for the board to decide what the acceptable level is. You know, obviously that's not for me to decide. That's a board decision, and I'll be happy to guide you any way that I can. The flip side to that number is, the way I look at it is, there's always the number that's on the paper, and then there's a realistic number, okay? Because normally in a normal year, and I realize we haven't had a normal year in a while, but in a normal year for a school district, you don't spend 100% of your budget, okay? The budget is kind of your plan if the worst case scenarios come about. Typically, it's been my experience that we spend about 97 to 98% of what is budgeted for a school district. And so hopefully each year there's about a 2% amount that will be left unspent. And so if you figure out, you know, do some real quick math, that kind of tells you what, if this was the worst case scenario, kind of, you know, that $2.9 million deficit really isn't a $2.9 million deficit if you only spend 98% of the budget, okay? So you always have a little wiggle room right there. But, you know, like I said, ultimately it comes down to y'all deciding how we proceed. I will tell you, and some of, you know, my introductory comments were kind of based on the fact that, based on my early knowledge of the district and the budget, and I don't want to say it easy, because nothing's easy, but you know, the supplies and the travel and all of that stuff has already been cut out, okay? 80% of your budget is people, salaries and benefits and everything that's associated with that. And so in order to make a significant impact to that bottom line, unfortunately, it comes down to people. And that does, I don't want to, not knowing who's listening out there in the community, that doesn't mean that we're going to come in and start riffing people and just cutting jobs. You can accomplish budget reductions by personnel through attrition, and you just don't fill positions if one comes up and you can make it without it. And to get back to Mr. Ergel's question, earlier about how did we do that, and I talked about efficiency. We may have to be uncomfortable for a little bit. We may not be able to do everything exactly the same way that MISD has done it for years and years and years. And so there may be some times when we are asking people to do a little more than maybe what they've been used to in the past. But if that helps get that budget number to where the board wants it to be, then that's something that we have to do. Because it's always bad practice to give pay raises out of fund balance, okay? And so the primary rule is if you're going to give a pay raise, you need to be able to pay for it out of your operating budget and not out of fund balance, okay? And so, that's one of my concerns, is just that I can already see that maybe the district is not as competitive as I know you want to be. Let's just use teacher salaries, okay? And some of the surrounding districts may have jumped out there and they may be offering higher salaries than what we're able to offer. But I use teachers, but it's all employees throughout the whole district, okay? I have a feeling that maybe you're not as competitive in the whole pay scale as you would like to be. And so at some point, in order to get back to being competitive, there's going to be some difficult decisions that have to be made. I'm not going to lie. This is not one of those situations where you can just continue to allow that $2.9 million deficit to just stay there and eventually it's going to take care of itself. It just doesn't work that way. And so as we look forward beyond 2021, I have some real concerns about what the funding is going to be from the state of Texas as we move into the new legislative session and to the 21-22 fiscal years and 22 and 23. And I apologize, I'm not familiar with all of your tenure on the board, but if you were on the board back in 2011, 2012, somewhere around that time frame, things were pretty difficult for school districts around the state. The state cut funding to districts, and many districts were out there riffing employees to make up those differences. With this COVID-19 pandemic, you have to think about all of the loss of sales tax revenues and look at the price of oil and some of the things that the state of Texas generates its money from and fills its rainy day funds with. And those sources aren't there right now. And so it is a little concerning to see where we're headed for 21, 22. And I don't like to be an alarmist, but I do like to be a realist. And I'm going to try and present to you a worst case scenario so that you've planned for the worst case. And I always hope that it works out better than what we planned on. That's just how I've operated, and it seems to have worked for 19 years. With your blessing, that's how I would like to continue to operate. Because the last thing I want to do is tell you you have a $2.9 million deficit and it winds up at 4.5. That doesn't do anybody any good, okay? So I'm always going to err on the side of caution.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Just a real quick question from me. When you mentioned the percentage of our budget that is devoted to salary, it went a little fuzzy on me there for a second. Would you mind saying that number again?
Sure. I'll be honest, I don't know the specific to the decimal point for Montgomery ISD yet, but typically for school districts around the state, it's generally around 80. Okay. I know in Channelview when I left, we were about 82%. Okay. So a general rule of thumb is about 80% is made up of salaries.
Okay. One thing that I think would help me make the decision that you're asking us to make in June or so is if we could get a comparison of our salary schedules and to see how far are we off on a variety of categories. I don't want to put words in the other board members' mouth, but you know, that helps me see how much we are behind and how much we can be okay with a deficit or not, in my opinion.
Sure. So I can start putting together some comparisons. I'm used to doing that. That's what I've done for many years. I'll get with Dr. Reese and we'll come up with a list of districts that we want to compare to. Obviously, we have to touch our neighbors, even though they may not be the same size, but that's who we compete with for employees. And then we also try and throw in some districts who are roughly the same size as we are to get an apples to apples comparison. But we can start gathering some of that information for you.
Hey, Chris, can you send this slide deck out as like a first draft kind of for review, or point me to where it's saved at someplace?
Sure. Yeah. I'll be happy to send this to you and get it for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir.
So, Chris, let me ask you right quick. You just said apples to apples, and I'm wondering, I have been on the board for 9 years, and our cost of employment, you know, benefits and employers, teachers, whatever, has always been right at 81 or 82 or 83%, kind of the state average.
Sure.
So are we in any different situation today? I mean, we're not underpaying our staff 10% to try to balance the budget or anything. I mean,
No, I think the problem is you haven't, you know, obviously you haven't cut salaries, okay? But maybe the pay raises that were given may not have matched what some of the surrounding districts gave. I don't know. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I just have not physically had the time to sit there and study those types of things yet.
fair point.
I do know that based on my experience, the amount that you pay towards employee health insurance is really high. It's a great thing. It's a great benefit for the employees. And so don't take my comments as something that, you know, I think that needs to be adjusted, because it's not. But you do have to balance that with when the state requires a payment of $225 a month and MISD is paying $370 a month. There are costs associated with that carry over from year to year to year. And as the district continues to grow and continues to add employees, that cost continues to escalate as well. And so some of those decisions do impact or you know, only it ties up some money that you may not have access to do as much as you would like to do. But I think it's fair to try and get some comparison information, and let's just see how you rank with the surrounding districts, because I know you don't want to lose good people to your neighbors, and so as deficits continue, obviously the first thing to go is pay raises, and so some of that may be happening in the near future or may have already started to happen. I don't know. That's not my area at this point. So,
Thanks, Chris.
yes, sir.
Dr. Reese, I have one question for you, if you don't mind. When do we know about teacher contracts, about, you know, whether or not there's like the hold harmless date or whatever? What is it for our district?
Say 45th day from the first day of instruction, which is typically around the first part of July, that teachers have that they can get out of their contract or, you know, resign, go to another district and whatnot. We do have resignations that we allow beyond that, but at the 45th day, the district could require a teacher to fulfill the contract.
That date this year, y'all, is June 29th, just due to the start of the school year being a little earlier next year. So penalty-free date is June 29th this year.
And so, those, like I said, those were kind of the end of my prepared comments for tonight. I do want to just kind of, the next slide is just kind of what comes next. If there's no additional questions, if there are additional questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I did have one other comment, Chris. If we do decide that we're going to adopt a deficit budget again this year, what I would like to know, there are a few things that I would like to know as well. Number one, what is our fund balance situation going to be start of next year? That's one question. And then if we do adopt a deficit budget, what is the plan for getting to a balanced budget? So, you know, one of the things I think that we have lacked in the past is when we got together last year, we had a goal of getting to a balanced budget in 2 years. Well, I think that we have made progress this year, and especially because, you know, if you factor in the loss of the fast growth money and the new instructional facilities money, we're really pretty close to where we need it to be. But it's also, in my opinion, kind of a bad thing to plan on being negative going in. So what I would say is, one of the things that I think that would help me at least come to the decision is, okay, if we accept that we're going to be a negative, adopt a negative budget, when are we going to get back to an even budget, a break-even budget, and what and how long is that going to take?
And we can work on that for you. That's not a problem. You know, we can get that information for you.
Yeah, I'm not asking you for the information tonight,
Sure.
but I just think that in order for us to make a decision, I would think that we would need to know that information.
I agree. And, you know, and like I said, I being new to the district, I don't have all of the history and the knowledge. I do believe, based on what I've heard, this is the highest the fund balance level has been in the district in quite a while. So it's not like it's all doom and gloom. Obviously, you know, we would all love to be running a balanced budget. And I think that's a great goal to have. You know, you can, but just because we have a deficit here or there, like I said in my opening comments, is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it just happens. But it just can't be one of those things where it happens on a continual basis. And so, you know, I think the district is not by any means in financial despair. So I don't want anybody to get that opinion based on that we're having conversations about a deficit budget. But we can definitely work on that information for you and help gather information so y'all can make an informed decision. Anybody else? And so what kind of comes next is, and I've just kind of labeled, you know, some things as far as the team of 8, meaning the Board of Trustees and the superintendent. At some point, there needs to be some discussion of staffing because, as Dr. Reese said, you know, we're getting resignations in, and so do we fill some of these positions? Do we not? How do we move forward? If there needs to be some conversations about what are our budget priorities, is there any thought for a pay increase? Is a balanced budget required? Is a deficit budget okay? Some of those things we just talked about are decisions that need to be discussed. And from my standpoint, in my department, what we are going to work on is we're going to continually refine our revenue estimates. We're going to continue to develop those campus and department budgets just as fast as we possibly can to get that information out to y'all so that you can make an informed decision. And right now, the next budget workshop on the calendar is June 1, 2020. But if there needs to be additional conversations before then, y'all make that decision and let me know, and we'll work around the timelines as best we can. Okay. Once again, I apologize that my late arrival here has put the district in this situation with the budget, but just rest assured, I'm working as many hours a day as I possibly can to get the answers that you need to make the decisions for this district. And so once again, I appreciate your trust and your willingness to allow me to be part of the team. I'm here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Reese or reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer anything that I can for you. And I'll be happy to share as much information with you as I possibly can.
Well, I will say, Chris, and I don't mean to speak for the board, but I do want to say thank you for putting all this together. I really do appreciate the fresh perspective that you're bringing. And we don't blame you for the budget at this point. You just got here. But we do want you to help us to get back to where we need to be. So anyways, thank you for all of your hard work and all of your team's hard work as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Great job, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, did you have a question?
No, I'm saying you hit the ground running and it looks very thorough. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Were there any other questions from the board for Chris at this point? Okay, so with that, thank you, Chris. We're going to go ahead and go into closed session as authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act to discuss and consider superintendent transition. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out this open session link and go into the closed session link. Okay, so I'm opening up the meeting again into open session. So do I have any motions from the floor, from the board?
Mr. President, I motion that we direct the school district to post an interim superintendent position on our HR website.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, and that is the end of the meeting. So with that, we will see you guys later. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.